Good afternoon, everyone, and I thank the press for being here. I thank the many persons who are viewing this live stream. I am here today because the President has indicated that it's time for Republicans to play the Trump card. He has indicated that it's time to eliminate the filibuster. Also, he has indicated that they might use what's known as the nuclear option now. The term nuclear option is something that is quite frightening to people, but I'll explain to you why you shouldn't be as frightened by it as some people are. The President, having said this, requires me to respond to what he has said by reminding persons that I had a press event right here in this very office on Thursday, October 2nd of 2025, Thursday, October 2nd. And at that press conference, I won't read all of what I said, but I do believe that these words are important. I indicated that they own the power to end the unjust shutdown. The they meaning the Republicans and President Trump. They own the power to end the unjust shutdown crisis scheme. They have created this unjust crisis scheme. And I also indicated at that press conference because they are refusing to negotiate at good faith. And I said that at some point, after refusing to negotiate in good faith with Democrats, Trump and Republicans will vote to end their shutdown crisis scheme after having caused much pain and suffering imposed by their dastardly shutdown crisis scheme. Now, I said that then, I meant it then, and I mean it now. President Trump knew all along that we could get to this point. And he knew all along that we'd get to this point if Democrats continued to persist on receiving justice for people who need insurance. He knew all along that we would get to this point. He has not been a person who has just arrived at this notion that the filibuster or the requirement of having 60 votes to get to cloture should be eliminated. In fact, I have an article here. This article is styled, "Trump to GOP, dump the filibuster before Schumer does." Printed in Politico, and it was last updated on June 26th of 2018. So since 2018, and probably long before that, the President of the United States has wanted to get rid of the filibuster. So the President has this scheme that he is developing. And for it to come to fruition, he would have to eliminate the filibuster. But what is the scheme? The scheme is simply this: not to agree to negotiate. He said today that he would only negotiate if the shutdown ends. So he's not going to negotiate with Democrats who want to negotiate. By the way, Democrats wanted to negotiate before the shutdown, but he's not going to negotiate with the Democrats. He says no negotiation. Let's go to legislation and let's eliminate the so-called filibuster, and that he would indicate they're doing this by using what's known as the nuclear option. This is what the President had in mind all along. The President has always felt that the filibuster was preventing him from doing things that he wants to do. And I say always, since at least the date that I called to your attention earlier. The President knows that he has the power to do this by cajoling, convincing, twisting arms, doing whatever is necessary to get the senators to go along with it. He has indicated that this is what should be done. Now, I don't know whether the senators will go along with him or not, but I do know this. I know that they could have ended this problem that they've created, this crisis that they've created, this scheme that they're implementing. They could have implemented the filibuster on day one, the elimination of it. They could eliminate it on day one, and we wouldn't have had all of this pain and suffering. Republicans understood that the pain and suffering that would be imposed upon people with SNAP, with health care, with all of the medical issues of food, clothing, shelter, the things that people need to survive, they knew from day one that they could use the elimination of the filibuster to achieve what they wanted in terms of passing what they're calling a clean CR. I do not consider it clean. That's a conversation that we can have on another day. But they knew all along that we didn't have to do this, that they could have done what they call eliminate the filibuster. I believe that this scheme is something that was crafted by President Trump and is now being perfected by President Trump. He refuses to negotiate, and he now wants to move to legislation. That has always been the option. The option has always been either legislate and eliminate the filibuster or negotiate. Well, what they call negotiation is capitulation. They don't work with Democrats and say, okay, let's talk about how we can resolve this. They give us a take it or leave it piece of legislation. That is capitulation. If I go along with what you have and without any input from me, then I am capitulating. They believe in capitulation over negotiation. And when they can't get the negotiation, then they're going to move to legislation that would in fact allow them to do now what they could have done on day one to prevent all of this pain and suffering. So yes, I still do what I have done, and that is contend that this is their scheme. This is the way they are plotting to eliminate the filibuster. I believe this, and I think the evidence is here. So I want you to read also this article from the Brennan Center, and it reads, it's styled, "The Filibuster Explained." And if you read this, you'll get a better sense of what the filibuster is all about. I'm not a big fan of the filibuster. I am one of the persons who thought that we should have eliminated the filibuster. By the way, President Trump says in this article, the first one that I called to your attention, that he wanted to do it before Schumer did it, and he had received some indication that Schumer was to do this. Now remember, this is 2018. Schumer never moved to eliminate the filibuster. If he had, we would have passed John Lewis voting rights. We would have passed George Floyd justice in policing. We would have raised the minimum wage. There are many things that we could have done if we had eliminated the filibuster, but we did not. By the way, again, I'm no fan of the filibuster. I'm no fan of this notion that you have to have 60 votes before you can pass something with 51 votes. I'm a believer in having the Senate do things. The filibuster is a status quo piece of legislation. It's the best way to maintain the status quo. It was the best way for the Southern senators to maintain the status quo as it related to segregation. They used the filibuster to prevent civil rights legislation from passing, most notably the Civil Rights Act of 1964. They have consistently, those Southern senators did consistently block civil rights legislation. So the filibuster has done more harm for people of color than good, in my opinion. So I think that it's time to let it go. I stand on this now as I have stood on it before, and there are a good many other members of the House that stood on it. I don't know where they are today, but I knew where they were when there was an opportunity for us to pass John Lewis voting rights. To close, let me say this. I believe that we should negotiate. I think that's the way to resolve this, to negotiate. The president has moved to this notion of legislate by way of the filibuster to eliminate the crisis that they have caused. I think that they can do that, but they could have done it on day one, and the president knows it because he's been an advocate of eliminating the filibuster since the year 2018, I believe is what I said. Yes, since June 26th of 2018, according to this article printed in Politico. Friends, these are some difficult times. People are suffering. I see no reason why the president couldn't have stepped off of Air Force One, and upon stepping off of Air Force One, simply say, look, let's negotiate, let's get this done. But he didn't. He said, we won't negotiate until the shutdown is over, and he said that we should now move and play the trump card, which is the elimination of the filibuster, so that he can do now what he could have done on day one. By the way, all of these people who have been terminated, people who have been laid off, the president at some point plans to fill these positions again, but they will be with people who are loyal to him above and beyond the Constitution. He now has an opportunity to fill literally tens of thousands of positions with loyalists. There is much more going on than meets the eye here, and we should wake up, open our eyes, and see what's happening to our country by way of what the president and his Republican colleagues, my colleagues, Republican colleagues, are doing to prevent us from negotiating so that they can move forward with this whole notion of eliminating the filibuster and passing what they consider a clean CR. I welcome your questions.
In layman's word, what does eliminating the filibuster mean to the mom, the single mother that's on her couch right now watching this? What does that mean to her?
Okay. Yes.
In real words.
For those who may not have heard the question, the gentleman's question was, in layman's terms, what does eliminating the filibuster mean for the mom who is having some concerns with SNAP, or persons who are having concerns with making ends meet? Well, here's what it means. It means that on day one, they could have done this. And on day one, they could have prevented the shutdown. So they will now prevent the shutdown with a tool that they could have used on day one. I think it's important for me to explain how the filibuster works, and then people can see how simple it is, because it seems that many people are of the opinion that this is something that requires an inordinate amount of effort to get done. Here's what they could have done on day one, since they're now ready to do it, the president and some of his followers. Here's how they could have done it on day one. They but only had to bring the piece of legislation before the Senate. And when the legislation is before the Senate, some senator says to the presiding officer, I move that this legislation be passed with a simple majority. And the presiding officer would say, no, you have to have 60 votes. That person who moved for the simple majority would then simply say, I appeal the ruling of the presiding officer or the chair. I appeal the ruling of the presiding officer. When the person does this, if you are the party to prevail, then we move forward in the direction that you have proclaimed. So if the presiding officer prevails, you stay with 60 votes. But if the person who said, no, let's do it with a majority, meaning 51 or more votes, if that person prevails, then you literally would move forward with 51 or more votes. And to do this, you only have to have 51 votes. So if 51 votes prevail, 51 people vote to move forward with that piece of legislation, then it would move forward without having to have 60 votes, which is what we have to have now. 60 has become the magic number to get things done in the Senate, it seems. You would eliminate that 60 vote rule. People would never have suffered all of the indignation and humiliation that they're having to contend with now. People could have gone to work, received their paychecks timely. All of this would be avoided if they had done that on day one, which they knew they could do on day one, but they decided to wait until the crisis was in full blossom so that they could blame Democrats and say, well, Democrats are the reason we're having to do this now, when they could have done it on day one. Now, to validate what I'm saying, when the Supreme Court had a vacancy and the Republicans wanted to put Gorsuch, Justice Gorsuch, on the Supreme Court, Justice Gorsuch couldn't get the 60 votes. What did they do? They made the motion that I just called to your attention, that a majority prevail, a simple majority, and avoid this cloture with 60 votes. And lo and behold, Gorsuch was placed on the Supreme Court with less than 60 votes. I believe the vote count was 54 to 45. He was placed on the Supreme Court with less than 50 votes. That's because that was important to them. It was important. If the welfare of the American people was important as putting Gorsuch on the Supreme Court, they would have done this on day one. But it's not. The welfare of the American people is not that important. It's getting the power to do what they want to do. They know that once they eliminate the filibuster, as the president wants to do it, then they can rush through all kinds of things that they want to do. But this was a clever way to get to this point where they can do it and blame Democrats. Well, Democrats are not to blame, should not be blamed, because Democrats have consistently said, let's negotiate. Let's negotiate. But rather than negotiate, they would want to dictate. They would want to give us a take it or leave it opportunity. And that's not the way you protect the health care of the American people. We've got to do this. Health care is the means by which people get to do all of the other things in life. So we have to protect health care. Yes.
A couple questions. Any word or anything you've heard about having just a separate bill for just to restore SNAP benefits?
I support that. I can't tell you whether it will ever be done because Republicans are in charge and they've said no. So until they say yes, we can't take that vote. You see, they have the majority. And what they're doing is refusing to do all other things until we capitulate. Or if we don't capitulate, then they will do now what they could have done on day one, and that is pass the legislation with a simple majority. They can do it. They could have done it, and they should have done it if they were going to do it at all. They should have done it on day one.
What do you tell people about, especially beginning tomorrow, essentially, that the ACA premiums will spike tomorrow? What can you tell people?
I want people to know this about not only the premiums, but also about SNAP, also about WIC. This should not happen. We have, and I say we, I mean the Congress, and that now the focus is on the Senate. The Senate had the authority to prevent all of this. Could have been done by negotiating with Democrats, or it will be done now, apparently, if the senators so agree with the president, and they seem to agree with everything he wants. If they would but only now move to a simple majority, they will have their way. And it appears that that's what they're about to do. Move to a simple majority, have their way, but once they open it, now they can do a lot of other things that they want to do as well. That's where we are. And I want that person who is suffering to know that if I get the opportunity to do something about their suffering, I'm going to do it. We have here in Houston food lines that are being developed by the food service programs that are available to us, the Houston Food Bank. We have other things that are developing. These are secondary and tertiary options. The primary option is to open the government. The best way to do it is to negotiate. But the Republicans and President Trump have decided that they are going to do it by somehow now having this epiphanous moment and realizing that they can do what they could have done on day one, and that is eliminate the filibuster and use 51 or more votes. There are more than 51 Republican senators, so they'll be able to do it. It's just a question of will they. They will either do that or they can negotiate, but they choose to do what I think is not the most reasonable way to resolve this. The most reasonable way, in my opinion, is let's talk to each other and come to conclusions about how we can handle SNAP, how we can handle WIC, how we can handle the whole question of health care for the American people.
One more question, I'm sorry. Politically, you have, it seems like one ally, at least in regards to the ACA, on the Republican side, and she's very vocal. Have you spoken to or heard from Marjorie Taylor Greene, who seems to be sort of calling in terms of wanting the ACA to?
I don't claim anybody as my ally on this. When I speak, look, I'm a liberated Democrat. I'm unbought, unbossed, unafraid. I speak truth to power and truth about power. That's why I can call names. That's why I can say Schumer. That's why I can say Trump. I can do this because I'm liberated. So I haven't spoken to her. But she's not the only person that said this. We have another member of the House who's said as much can be done. We've had a member in the Senate, Fetterman, who said that it can be done. These are persons that have their opinions. But I speak for myself and everybody who agrees with me. So if they agree with me, then I speak for them. Now, another question before I close. Okay, we're passing out these two documents, the document styled Trump to GOP, dump the filibuster before Schumer does. Schumer didn't. This was a political article from June 26 of 2018. Schumer didn't. And because he didn't, we could not pass George Floyd Justice in Policing, John Lewis Voting Rights Act, could not raise the minimum wage. There were many things that we wanted to do. In fact, we probably wouldn't have this circumstance in Texas right now where the president is demanding 5 5 additional seats from Texas in the House of Representatives. Because if we had passed the voting rights legislation that was pending, this would have been prevented because he couldn't have done it under the voting rights legislation that's pending. It would have been thwarted. So the president knows that if he wants to have his way, then he needs to eliminate the filibuster, and he's going to now try to cajole these senators into do it. And I say to the senators, negotiate. That's the better way to do it. Let's negotiate. I stand ready to negotiate. Finally, of my final words, this is the piece of legislation, a news article styled "The Filibuster Explained," and this is printed at the Brennan Center, and it was printed April 26th of 2021. I'm going to place these things on our website so that persons can go to our website and receive them. We'll make sure that they're there, and I hope that the press will carry this message. I have been saying what I'm saying now for some time, and I know that we're live streaming, so it's going to be received there, and I'm hoping that the press will explain that at least one person has a position that seems to align with what Republicans are doing. This is not a position that is out of line. I've been at the forefront of this issue. I hope that people will get an opportunity to hear someone explain that they could have done on day one what they are saying they will do now. They know they could have done it. They could have carved out an exception just for this if they wanted to on day one. There have been other exceptions carved out for elimination of the filibuster to get certain things done. So they could have prevented all of this, and there were 2 ways that it could have been prevented. One, negotiate with Democrats. That's the methodology that I prefer. Let's negotiate. Could have done that. But they choose not to negotiate so that they can now say that we have been pushed to the point that we have to legislate by way of eliminating what's known as the filibuster, and do that by using what's known as the nuclear option, which is just a way to scare people into believing that the world will come to an end or the Senate won't be the Senate that it should be. The Senate can work quite well without the filibuster, in my opinion. But that's not what I'm advocating for now. For now, I think we should negotiate. So I would say to the president, if you have an opportunity now to rethink your position, do so. And let's make sure that we negotiate. Negotiation is the best way to deal with this. Do not bring something that requires capitulation. I'm praying that no one will capitulate, but I can't speak for anybody but myself, and I assure you, I will not capitulate. We will either negotiate, or you can go on and do what you choose to do now, which is something you could have done on day one to prevent all of this suffering. This suffering exists because my Republican colleagues refuse to negotiate and know that they can eliminate the suffering by simply passing with a simple majority if they want to, a simple rule that circumvents all of this. I thank all of you for tuning in, and I pray that you'll get an opportunity to hear what I've said.